Good morning and good evening to everyone. So let us start with the opening recitations. Nampe senchen namche dewa tangde dunya tangdu nerdu lana me paya tabra sobe janju rumbo je tombra jam dangwa jepe drai no par jepe ge tarba dan tamje kembe bardu jabra jeba tam jege se jebe ma nang ka dang nyampe senchen tamje dewa dang de dunya dang de nerdu lana me pa yang tabra sobe janju rumpo je tobra jo dala dangwa jepe drai no par jepe ge tarba da tamje gembe bardu jobra jeba tam jege se jebe ma nang ka dang nampe senchen tamje dewa dang de dunya dang de nerdu lana me pa yang Dara sobe janju rinpo je dobra jo dangwa jepe da nobar jepe ge tarba dan tam je gembe bardu jobra jeba tam je ge se jebe ma nang ka dang nyambe senchen tam je dewa dang de dumiao dang je nerdu lana me pa yang tabra sobe janju rinpo je dobra jo Samba Jeki Bardu Lunga Yesu Gewala Gu Mashi Bardu Lunga Yesu Gewala Gu Dere Sunde Nema Santa Sangi Bardu Lunga Yesu Gewala Gu Sanje Jodan Soge Chonala Chanju Bardu Dani Gensu Che Nage Jinsu Gibe Sonyanke Rala Penche Sanje Dobro Sanje Chodan Soge Chonala Chanju Bardu Dani Gensu Che Nage Jinsu Gibe Sonyanke Rala Penche Sanje Dobro Sanje Chodan Soge Chonala Chancho bardo dani gyamso chi dagi jinzo gebe sonanke dola penche sanje dubro sho kada nyampe sanje tamche dewa dang dewe geda dembro kyuchi dumya dang dumya ki gyudang dewa gyuchi dumya mepe dewa dang me dewa gyuchi Nirin chadang nidang drawe tanyang la nabra gyuji. Kadang nyampe senchen tamche dewa dang dewe gyudang dambra gyuji. Dunyao dang dunyao ji gyudang drawa gyuji. Dunyao mebe dewa dang me drawa gyuji. Nirin chadang nidang drawe tanyang la nabra gyuji. Kada Nampe Senchen Tamje Dewa Dam Dewe Gindan Dembra Gyurji Dumya Dan Dumya Yi Gyudan Drawa Gyurji Dumya Mepe Dewa Dame Drawa Gyurji Nirin Chadan Nidang Dewe Tanya La Nebra Gyurji. In all the worlds of the 10 directions reside Tathagatas of the 3 times. Before each of you, lions among humans, I prostrate joyfully with body, speech, and mind. By the power of this aspiration to noble deeds, all conquerors appear vividly in my mind. With as many bodies as there are atoms in all lands, I prostrate to all you. conquerors in each atom of Buddhas, numberless as atoms, all in the midst of the heirs of the Buddhas. Thus I conceive of this Dharma Dhatu as completely filled with you, conquerors in this way. With infinite oceans of praise and oceans of diverse melodies, I sing the excellent qualities of all you conquerors, and praise all of you gone to bliss. With the best flowers and best garlands, best music, ointments, and excellent parasols, finest lamps and superior incense, I offer to you conquerors with excellent garments and best fragrances, and sandalwood powder heap high as Mount Meru. All wondrous offerings perfectly arranged I offer to you, conquerors. These vast and unequal offerings to each and every one of you, conquerors, with the power of conviction in noble deeds, I prostrate and offer to all you conquerors all the harmful deeds that I have done with my body, speech, and mind, under the power of desire, hatred, and ignorance. I confess each and every one of them. I rejoice in all the meritorious deeds of all conquerors in the 10 directions and the heirs of the Buddhas. Solitary realizers, hearers still in training and beyond, and all wandering beings. You who are lamps of the worlds of the 10 directions, who have unobstructedly attained Buddhahood through the stages of Bodhi. All you who are my protectors, please turn the unexhaled wheel of Dharma. With palms together, I earnestly beseech you who may intend to manifest final nirvana, please remain for as many eons as there are atoms in the world, for the happiness and well-being of all wandering beings. Whatever slight virtue that may have been gathered through prostrating, offering, confessing, rejoicing, requesting, and beseeching, I now dedicate to complete Bodhi. This ground sprinkled with scented waters and strewn with flowers, adorned with the supreme mountain and 4 continents, I hold in mind as a Buddha land and offer it. May all wandering beings experience such a pure land. To the Gurus who possess the 3 kayas, I offer the outer, inner, secret, and thusness offerings. With my body, wealth, and all phenomenal existence, please grant the unsurpassed supreme attainment. Whatever slight virtue I may have gathered through prostrating, offering, confessing, rejoicing, requesting, and beseeching, I now dedicate it all to complete Bodhi. Om Guru Devada Ginirana Mandala Pratecha Soham. Please turn the wheel of Dharma of the greater, lesser, and common vehicles in accordance with the dispositions and mental capacities of sentient beings. Durje Chanjet Dele Naroda Mamita Mupado Jedin Kukade Sudin Sabela Mission Sanjula Majitam Chukila Soba de Sudan Yichin Kiam Rengi Dume Zamling Gen Robert Duzin Yung Gen Zume Gawa Durje Chang Pa Jidin Kumpa Shanda de Tatu Sangyo Gyole Mejin Chilo Shi Chujen Chin Ninge Mumpesa Negam Zendro de Duto Prajin Jilo Hong Wajin Yujin No Chang Sang Pema Kesa Tumbo La Yasin Jokin Wadrin Pema Chun Shishu Guru Gadu Mampo Gurgeki Jesa Ta Duke Jin Lo Jishe Suso Guru Bema Sindhu Oh man, drinking you get what done there. This is a Japanese woman. I think Joker was a don but so we la me shabla so those of you in Little Rock, Arkansas, must have sent the snow this way. It's here. One last view of snow before I leave for a very warm place. Yeah, so we continue in this chapter on wisdom. So we are on verse 15. Yeah? So I'm going to mention, just to give kind of background to the more traditional way of studying chapter 9. So in the Tibetan monastic education, in the scholarly circles of Tibetan Buddhism, generally it is said in that system that if you summarize all the different Buddhist philosophical systems in India, all the different Buddhist philosophical systems in India, if you summarize them and generally group them, you can basically put them into 4 basic groups. So these 4 philosophical systems are divided into Hinayana philosophical systems and Mahayana philosophical systems. Under the Hinayana philosophical systems, it's the Vaibhashika and Sautrantika. Vaibhashika can be translated as particularists, as in their focus is on distinctions, particular distinctions, particularists or distinctions. So in that philosophical system, they carefully analyze big objects like I, into particulars. So into the 5 aggregates, and then each of the aggregates can be further analyzed into their particulars, and further analyzed into the particulars, and further analyzed into the particulars. And so they are said. So this is, of course, not necessarily what they themselves say they are. And this is just a system that is developed in late Indian Buddhism to characterize this first group as those who are very good at analyzing outer phenomena, inner phenomena into their particulars. So they're called particularists, distinctions. Then the next group under the Hinayana grouping are the Sautrantikas. Sautrantika can be translated as followers of Sutra. Followers of Sutra. That name is, you could say that name, that label, is a way to distinguish this group from the Vaibhashikas. Because the Vaibhashikas put their energy in understanding the Abhidharma. Whereas the second group, they say, our primary focus is not on the Abhidharma, or on the Abhidharma texts, but on the sutras. So here, footnote, the earliest collection of the Buddha's teachings, Buddha taught 45 years, right? All those teachings for those 45 years, very early on in the Buddhist community were grouped into Vinaya texts, which is texts of primary focus on discipline, ethical conduct, particularly the do's and the don'ts and the guidelines for monks and nuns, but not just monks and nuns, obviously, also for laymen, laywomen, but the main focus is on monastic discipline. So those are the Vinaya texts. Then there are the discourses or sermons or teachings given by the Buddha on various topics. Those are called sutras. Then there's a third category, which is these like technical manuals, philosophical manuals. Those are called Abhidharma. The Abhidharma, in some way you could say, is like, whereas, for example, a sutra, I think many of you are familiar with the sutra, often there's a narrative going on. It says, at one time the Buddha was at this place, and then somebody asked him a question, and then he answered. And then somebody followed up with other questions, and then he answered. So sutras have that style. Abhidharma, on the other hand, is like you could say it's like taking out the material from sutra and organizing them into a system, a systematized. So very early, there's already these three groups of literature, of authoritative texts in this tradition. So the Vaibhashikas, the first group, mostly look at Abhidharma texts. The second group, those who are called followers of Sutra, they say, we're not like you other guys who focus on the Abhidharma. We focus on the sutras. So they're called Sautrantikas. Then the last two of the four under the Mahayana category, it's the Chitta Matra, or the mind only mind tradition, and the middle way, Madhyamaka tradition, philosophical system. So those are the third and the fourth. So the mind only, Chitta Matra, they are said to emphasize, they have an analysis, right, of outer and inner phenomena, which is basically based on the idea that everything that we perceive, everything that we assume to exist out there, are in fact only projections of our mind. produced by our mind and then experienced by mind. Then the final philosophical tradition, the Madhyamaka, which means the middle way tradition. The middle way tradition emphasizes the emptiness aspect of things. And so in particular, it says, in order to achieve Bodhi awakening, and for that matter, whether it's the Bodhi of a hearer, or the Bodhi of a solitary realizer, or the Bodhi of a complete Buddha, so the three types of Bodhi, right? In order to realize this Bodhi, in order to achieve this awakening, it is necessary to fully and completely realize the lack of self, the lack of essence of both persons and phenomena. Persons are the gross level. Phenomena is the subtle level. So they emphasize that to fully and completely and thoroughly realize the emptiness. So emptiness means the lack of identity, the lack of essence of both persons, like I, you, as well as phenomena, which is phenomena are things like, for example, any of the five aggregates, any of the elements, earth, wind, fire, water, physical elements, that they all lack essence. They all lack self. Now, these four, arranging all the diversity of Indian Buddhist positions and philosophy into the group of four, is a product of the Nalanda tradition. So in the Nalanda tradition, in late Indian Buddhism, they have basically simplified in some ways, because for sure in Indian Buddhism, there are more than these four philosophical positions. Right? There's a great diversity of different positions about this and that, and many, many, many. But in the Nalanda system, they have summarized it into and divide things into four. Now, obviously, also when it's divided into these four, to be objective, you have to recognize that it's clearly kind of the system is devised by someone or by those who belong to which of the four? Madhyamaka, the middle way. Because the way they divide it, right, into these four, there is a progression from less profound to more profound. So first the division into Hinayana and Mahayana. So even using the name Hinayana, meaning the limited, the small vehicle, clearly it's already, instantly it should tell us, well, this must be, a system, a label that people who think of themselves as followers of the great vehicle came up with, right? So these four, according to those who follow the Madhyamaka system, says the first three, it's not that they are wrong. It's just that what they teach is incomplete, not profound enough. But they were taught nonetheless by the Buddha because of, like the beginning prayer we always do when we request teachings, we say, please teach according to the abilities and the mental capacities of sentient beings. Please teach according to what they are capable of hearing, that they are capable of digesting. So, because of that, Buddha first taught more generally. Buddha first taught a way to understand things that is not so shocking. So he began first with what the particularist view is, which is Buddha says, first you have to not take appearances as they appear. Instead, whatever appears to you, you need to analyze and see, actually, what we call a person, a human being, is not a thing. A human being is composed of so many different parts. The mental parts, the physical parts. The mental parts can be further divided down into smaller parts, into smaller parts, into smaller parts, into smaller parts. The physical parts can be divided further into smaller parts and smaller parts and smaller parts. And like today, scientists really analyze the physical parts. When I was a kid, we only learned about atoms and protons or whatever. And now there's like quarks, and smaller parts and smaller parts and smaller parts. So the particularist system was the first one introduced by the Buddha, so that people are not deceived by mere appearances. People can look beyond mere appearances. And so all of reality is broken down into these parts, these particulars. So then it is said, for the particularists, for the Vaibhashikas, with regards to what is relative truth and what is ultimate truth, they say relative truth is the way things appear to us. That's relative truth. Ultimate truth is when you begin to analyze and you like me, I, there's body, there's mind. Then body further analyze, right, into all the parts. There's head, there's torso, left hand, right hand, then hand down to fingers and upper and arm, and and then analyze. They say when it is analyzed until you can no longer make it any smaller, down to the smallest building blocks. And they call those dharmas. Each of those is a type of dharma, which is cannot be further made smaller. Those, they say, that's the ultimate truth. Ultimate truth refers to all these basic building blocks of both outer and inner phenomena, of both physical and mental phenomena. All those basic building blocks. So in the Abhidharma system, there is a lot of a list. There are these lists of these ultimate dharmas, these ultimately irreducible building blocks of all phenomena. Those are said to be ultimate truth. Yeah, I see a raised hand. There's a question? Maybe?
No, that was a mistake, I think.
Oh, okay.
I'm sorry.
Oh, hi. There's another question? Yes? We cannot hear you. You have to unmute.
Thank you,
Yes.
Dr. Lai.
Mhm.
So in these systems that you're talking about and how they're divided, whether it's those that concentrated on the sutra,
Yes.
mind only, then we have the middle. Are you saying that in themselves, some of them, they are completely are they lacking is in how they were at that time, lacked the full picture? Each system needed the other, because the logical conclusion from mind only, we're seeing things from our mind, would be to take it a step further to say, well, what does that mean? And then the middle way sort of takes care of that. So I'm just saying, it seems as if it's being presented as these each were very different and had maybe not all of the, it was incomplete.
According to the fourth group.
Okay. Well,
The first three groups are incomplete.
yeah, right. Okay, yeah.
Yes, that's what I'm trying to emphasize.
Okay, yeah, well, that's what I felt. Yeah.
This is in some ways you could say this is a biased view. This is based on the people who came up with these this system, saying that
Yeah.
there are these four. Then, by the way, we are the fourth, we are the highest. Okay, now our business here is not to get into who is right and who is wrong. I'm only giving you the context to Shantideva's chapter on wisdom. Okay, so bear with me, don't think too much about, who got it right, who got it wrong, is it something skillful? Is it something petty? Leave that alone. First, let's understand some of the vocabulary that is going to turn up. And why is Shantideva talking the way he's talking? Yeah. In fact, this way of kind of arranging things and in some ways simplifying and dividing, what was way more diverse and therefore way more confusing. But this way of dividing them and grouping them into these four and presenting them as more and more profound, complete view, accurate view. You could say it's actually a noble way of dealing with differences. In other parts of the world, in other traditions, the way you deal with differences is, this is right, that is wrong. This comes from God, that comes from not God. We are the only ones that are right. Everybody else should be wiped out. But the Indian style, not limited to Buddhists, so I think maybe it's not even a Buddhist thing, but the Indian style of dealing with differences is not to try to push out, whatever don't agree with you, but to figure out how to accommodate. That doesn't exactly correspond with how you understand things. You find a way to accommodate them. You find a way to fold them in, so that understanding and order is possible. So this is what, in a way, the Nalanda tradition has done, which is to take the diversity of positions and try to organize into a way that makes sense. In fact, we know, in terms of like historical development, this way of arranging things into Vaibhashika, Sautrantika, Chittamatra, and Madhyamaka, they don't match how they historically developed. In fact, more likely are followers of Sutra, Sautrantika, with or without that label. That the earliest Buddhist community probably followed that approach, mainly studied the sutras. with the Abhidharma as a supplementary specialized field of studies. Then people got really into Abhidharma because it's the stuff of philosophy, right? So you could philosophize, you know, you could debate, right? You could like basically split hairs, you know? So only later, right? The positions like the Vaibhashikas began to emerge. So then even between Chittamatra and Madhyamaka, right? We know that historically, Chittamatra position came as an attempt to address some of the problems that arose from overemphasizing emptiness, which is the Madhyamaka focus on emptiness. That the Chittamatra is a way to address excesses of everything is empty, everything is empty, everything is empty. Then Chittamatra says, wait, but there is mind. It's not just everything empty. Yes, so so the Nalanda solution, right, to all these differences is to say that, in fact, these are not just ordinary differences. In fact, the Buddha intended, because you see, all four of these traditions, they all quote, the Buddha's words, right? So you cannot say, like, oh, that belief is wrong. Or rather, yeah, so they all quote the Buddha's words. So you cannot say, oh, that belief is wrong, that understanding is wrong. Instead, it said that understanding is not complete. That understanding is still more preliminary. And the Buddha taught slowly, step by step. So these four are called the four kind of philosophical systems, or the four tenet systems. So again, in the later Nalanda tradition, they say what we should do. In fact, even before these four, they say the Buddha even taught other spiritual traditions, other non-Buddhist spiritual traditions, they say, ultimately also come from the wisdom mind. The wisdom mind, which is the mind of all Buddhists. So they say even all the other spiritual traditions, they all come from this wisdom mind, because the wisdom mind would respond to whatever is needed wherever to help people to move further away from suffering and closer to happiness. So the way we should relate to all these different views, different positions, the example I like to use is, it's like a monkey. It's like a monkey traveling through a forest. That's the example, and I will explain more that analogy. So a monkey traveling through a forest. And this forest, it's really dangerous, especially at the floor of the forest. There are these predators that will consider the monkey as lunch. So for this monkey to safely go from one part of the forest to another part of the forest, the monkey has figured out it's safe to swing on top on the trees, from one tree to another tree, from one branch of the tree to another branch of the tree, and so travel through the forest, right, by swinging from branch to branch and tree to tree, until the monkey gets to where it needs to get to, into safety, into food, wherever it's going. So each of these branches on each of these trees, as the monkey swings from one to the other, the monkey grabs one branch that is in front and lets go of the branch that is behind, right? In order to have the momentum to swing to the next branch, catches with the left hand the next further branch. Then with the right hand, what does the monkey need to do? Let go of the last branch and swing forward. So in a similar way, the different views and understanding that we have, we need to know that they are all temporary and tentative. We need to let go of the less profound view once we have a more profound understanding. If you don't let go, you get stuck. You have to also know that your current one is not yet the final. Otherwise, again, you'll be stuck in the middle of the forest and never getting to where you need to go. However, if you have not firmly held on to one branch and you let go of the other branch that you have a firm grip on, you will fall to the floor of the forest and subject to all the dangers. Yeah, so all these different views, all these different positions, see them as kind of there's a more profound view, there's a more profound understanding that I can reach, and in this way go from one to the other and to the other, until we get to the safety of the other side. So this kind of understanding, and appreciation of what the Nalanda system has come up with has very, I think, practical implications for us. So one implication that we can appreciate is whenever we think, my view now is the most profound. And then we think that this is final. Whenever we have that, it's probably a sign that we are stuck now. Because if you think, yes, this is final, but then you're like, wait, I'm still not a Buddha. So then probably it's not the final. There's something more. So if we have this to guide us, then we won't become like fundamentalists. We won't become dogmatic with the understanding that we have. I mean, we of course appreciate, we cherish, the understanding that we're able to develop. But we should not fall into the trap, into the mistake of thinking, yes, I got it, yes, this must be it. And then whoever don't agree with me, you are wrong. The second implication of this I can think of is the example shown by His Holiness the Dalai Lama. So because he's such a public figure, right? So he goes many places, meeting many different people, and often asked to address an audience that is not even Buddhist, maybe from other traditions, maybe don't have a specific belief system. So he's able to kind of manifest, embody this Nalanda spirit in the sense that he always says, and I believe it's genuine, he always says, that you should have confidence, you should develop confidence and trust in your own spiritual tradition and practice that to the best you can. Then, with regards to other spiritual traditions, other religions, you should develop appreciation for them and try to see how, even though other religion, other spiritual traditions, their beliefs, the details of their beliefs are not the same as mine, but they are capable of producing the results that I'm seeking. Results such as love, kindness, patience. He says, these are universal results. Nobody has special claims over them. And he says, I can see, and he says, I try to develop, to see how these qualities arise, even for people who believe in systems that I consider, because of my own system, to be not profound, to be inferior. But they produce the results that I'm looking for. So how can I deny, or how can I condemn these other traditions? He says, no, in fact, even there are times when Dalai Lama was, engaged in interfaith dialogue about these values, right? What he called human values of compassion, kindness, patience, understanding, tolerance, things like that. And then sometimes people will ask him to speak about, because people have read, and people will ask him to speak about like emptiness, which in the Buddhist system, and especially in Tibetan Buddhism, Madhyamaka, the fourth of the four systems, emptiness is like the most important topic, right? The most profound topic. When they ask him to speak on this topic of emptiness, he will actually say, he said, oh, I don't think it's necessary to talk about this. He says, because this is not this is not relevant to what we're talking about here. He says, this is not relevant to you. Or sometimes people more explicitly will say, can you speak about like the Buddhist denial of the existence of an all-powerful God? And then he will actually say, he said, oh, no, not necessary to talk about this. And later he explains, he says, because, in the audience, there are so many committed Christians, Muslims, and their practice of love and compassion and patience and understanding is strongly based on believing and trusting in an all-powerful God that is loving and just. So if I undermine that belief and talk about, the Buddhist critique of such a God, then I run the risk of undermining their practice of love and compassion. So that is a very serious mistake, he says. So we should not. We should not do that. Then when we come back to Shantideva, in this case, right, he is debating. But here, he's debating his fellow Nalanda students. And of course, in the Nalanda tradition, by his, like in the Nalanda tradition, Madhyamaka, the middle way, the emphasis on emptiness, is understood to be the most profound, the highest understanding. So here what he's doing is he is addressing the doubts and the challenges and the debates brought up by the non-Madhyamaka positions. So then he goes through and he would debate, he would kind of tear apart, right, the arguments and counter arguments from the other points of view. So this is different, right, because he is addressing a community where at least formally considers the Madhyamaka, the middle way position, to be the most profound. So he's helping them understand more clearly this view, this position of Madhyamaka. So if you look at the traditional commentaries on this chapter, as I've said, they will identify for you, oh, over here he is talking to the Vaibhashikas and refuting the Vaibhashika position. Or over here, he's talking about the Sautrantika, or a subdivision of the Sautrantika, and he's refuting their position. Or over here, he is talking to the Chittamatra, or this branch of the Chittamatra, and he's refuting this, and he's refuting that, right? But we're not going to do this. Rather, what I'll do, as I've said again and again, is I'll try to go through this section of this chapter, because this chapter has other things, not just refuting. But we'll try to go through this section of this chapter. And so the next section is about the Chittamatra, about the mind only. But I'm not going to spend time talking about the mind only. Rather, what I'll try to do is to show you how you and I, whether we know what Chittamatra is and all the complicated subdivisions of Chittamatra is, how we might have the faults that he's describing in terms of how we relate to things, in terms of how we relate to our Dharma practice. Because the Chittamatra position has some very close similarity to what some of you have learned about Dzogchen or Mahamudra or Zen. All these traditions have tremendous emphasis on mind. And then such as like the mind is luminous, bright. The mind has this quality of knowing. And in fact, in these traditions, it says you need to look for the mind. You need to see the nature of your mind, right? In the Chan tradition, there's a practice of observing the mind, 看心, things like that. But Shantideva has some caution that he brings into this and say, now be careful. When we're focusing on the mind, be careful what? Be careful not to make mind an object of grasping. That's essentially the take-home lesson for this next section. Even as we are focusing now on mind and the centrality of mind, do not turn this into another, even though subtle, but nonetheless another basis for grasping to occur, to take place. So Shantideva here, his audience is primarily already people who are supposed to appreciate that Madhyamaka, the middle way, is the highest view. So it's within that context, he is refuting or debating the non-Madhyamaka traditions. I believe that, if he was asked to teach a course on Vaibhashika to followers of Vaibhashika, then he will, do his best to present the Vaibhashika view. Because that's the audience, a Vaibhashika audience. He might even refute or Madhyamaka position based on Vaibhashika. I will boast a little bit. Many years ago, when I was teaching at a big university, I would lecture to 300 students, 400 students. There's one course that I would teach called Introduction to Asian Religions. So I would teach like Hinduism, Taoism, and Buddhism, 15 weeks, 5 weeks each, real general, and I was happy to hear from time to time these students after class, they would kind of discuss and kind of debate, So is Dr. Lai Hindu? Is Dr. Lai Taoist? No. He's definitely he's Hindu. And then someone say, no, definitely he's Buddhist. No, definitely he's. So to me, it means, that they don't know my own biases. Because I felt that, when it's time for me to teach Hinduism, I should not let my Buddhist prejudice enter the picture. It's when it's time to teach Taoism, I should not let, my own biases enter the picture. Of course, we're going to be biased, in subtle ways, but at least not in the, explicit way. Let's take a few minutes break, and then we'll do a few verses of Shantideva. But let's take a quick break.
Wage jore mum, 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 wage jore mum. Wage jore mum, 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 wage jore mum. Wage jore mum, 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 wage jore mum. Wage jore mum, 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 wage jore mum. Wage jore mum, 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 wage jore mum. Wage jore mum, 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 wage jore mum. Wage jore mum, 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 wage jore wage jore mum, 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 wage jore mum. Wage jore mum, wage jore mum, wage
So, verse 15, the second part of that. So here, Shantideva is raising a hypothetical objection, or raising a hypothetical question, a challenge to the Madhyamaka position. And the challenge is this: if even that which is deceived does not exist, what is it, you will ask, that sees illusion? So basically this question is saying, that which is deceived, in other words, I, or in this case, my mind. If you say that this mind does not exist, then what actually understands illusion, right? If that which understands illusion, you say don't exist, which is a Madhyamaka position. Madhyamaka position is everything is illusory, including that which is under the power of illusion is also illusory. So here, the objection is, well, if everything is illusory, including that which is under the power of illusion is illusory, So what is there to see illusion and therefore break through or overcome illusion? So good question, you know. So if everything, right, is illusion, including the mind, what realizes illusion? Is the question. Shantideva doesn't give an answer necessarily in the next two lines, but he gives a response. And the response, you could say, it's what you could call a throwing it back to the questioner. And so what does he do? He's the first two lines of verse 16. But if for you, these same illusions, meaning the illusion that is perceived, have no being, no truth, no reality, what indeed is there to be perceived? So what Shantideva here is doing is saying, okay, you raise the objection that lacking, in other words, lacking a subject, how can there be an object? Subject being what is deluded, right? Object being the delusion, the illusion, which is the question raised. Shantideva now says, well, you guys on the other hand, he is sort of like him saying, okay, good question, but you guys on the other hand is saying that the object is not real. He says, therefore, what is there for the subject that you believe to be real to perceive? In other words, Shantideva is pointing to how subject and object are reliant on each other. If subject is not real, objects are not real. If objects are not real, subjects are also not real. But he didn't state this explicitly. He just throws back, turns the question back onto the questioner. So then, back to the questioner. The questioner has a follow-up. The challenge has a follow-up. It says, but so the questioner answers Shantideva. But objects have another mode of being. So I'm reading translation of line 3 and 4 of verse 16. It says, but objects have another mode of being. That very mode is but the mind itself. So this position says, the object, meaning the delusion, the illusion, the whatever illusory appearance, that is actually mind, because it's projection of mind. So that's their answer. They say, no, we can explain this. We can explain this. Because we say mind is real, then what the mind perceives or misperceives is the unreal projection of the mind. It's basically the response to Shantideva. So this is like the Chittamatra position. It's like everything perceived right now is confused, is illusion. So this illusion arises from the mind. And so mind is real, illusion is not real. In a way, you could say the Chittamatra position then, with regards to the two truths, is that the mind is ultimate truth. The projections of the mind is relative truth. Now Shantideva responds. He says, now verse 17. If the mirage is the mind itself, what then is perceived by what? In other words, it says, if the mirage, if the illusion is also the mind, then what is seeing what? Then he quotes, he says, the guardian of the world, meaning the Buddha, himself has said, mind cannot be seen by mind. Furthermore, in verse 18, the example the Buddha gave was a sword cannot cut itself, using that as an analogy. In the same way that a sword cannot cut itself, mind cannot see mind. Then the opponent, right, the Chittamatra side is made, says, but a flame can illuminate itself. Okay, but then Shantideva's answer to that is like, no, a flame cannot. It says here in the translation, in verse 19, a flame cannot brighten itself. Actually, more accurate is he's saying a flame need not brighten itself, because by its nature it's bright, so it has no need. Its function is not there to brighten itself. Then quickly Shantideva has the opponent saying something else. This is line 3 and 4 of 19. The blueness of a thing that is by nature blue doesn't depend on anything else. By nature, it is blue. So like blue gemstone, it says, by nature, it is blue. So it doesn't depend on anything else. And this opponent goes on to say, likewise, so first he gave the analogy, then now the implication of the analogy, which is first 2 lines of 20. Likewise, some perceptions come from other things, while other perceptions are not dependent on other things. Here, basically, what Shantideva has the opponent saying is, the mind can stand on itself. The mind is not dependent on other things. The mind, so the example of the mind lights itself. The mind illuminates itself. The mind is not dependent on other things. This is what the opponent says. And then 21 to 24 is Shantideva's response to all of this, all of these problems raised. So 21, it says, the phrase, the lamp illuminates itself, that what you just said. It says, yes, the mind can know and the mind can formulate this idea, yes. But what is there to know and say that mind is self self-illuminating. So basically, Shantideva said, yeah, you can come up with analogies, but the analogy itself is not proof of your claim, which is mind is self-illuminating, meaning, and the implication of mind is self-illuminating is the mind can stand on itself, which is leads to the mind is real, because everything is mind, therefore the mind is real. In verse 22, Shantideva is basically saying, this assertion that the mind knows itself serves no purpose at all. So he says, it's like talking about the beauty of a barren woman's daughter. So what in part this argument or in part the strength of Shantideva's reasoning or argument here, or maybe reasoning is better, the strength of Shantideva's reasoning is based on based on the understanding that if you say mind can see itself, now you have to admit that there are two things. Two things like present in one person. This mind is seeing itself. In the same way that I will use a different example, which is your eyes cannot see your eyes. You can look in the mirror, but that's not seeing your eye. That's not your eye seeing your eye. It's your eye seeing a reflection. Verse 23 raises another objection. It says, okay, if you say that the mind, one mind cannot see itself, right? How does it then remember what it remembers? So this is a question of memory. Now, where does memory come from? Shantideva's answer to that is, it says, the last line of 23, it is through the link that brings, it is through the link with things, experience, that memory occurs. So basically Shantideva's answer is, he says, memory what memory is basically a series of cause and effect. Through a chain of causes and effects, a memory arises. In other words, you do not need a soul. You do not need a independently existing mind that can stand on itself, right, to account for memory. So in fact, our modern view is like this, right? In the scientific view, in the secular view, you don't need a soul to account for memory. You say it's just a bunch of, right? In our expression, is a bunch of, like, you know, chemicals shooting in a particular way that accounts for memory. You don't need something substantial there. In verse 24, Shantideva raises a final objection or question on behalf of the Chittamatra. He says, now, what about when we say someone can read someone else's mind? It says, because this is all accepted. Buddha can read other people's minds. That's basically what it's saying. Or very powerful meditators, or people who have cultivated this ability, they can read other people's minds. Do you disagree with that? Of course, Shantideva said, no, I don't disagree with that. Then he says, then if one mind can perceive another mind, why can't it perceive itself? Shantideva's answer, again, he gives an analogy. He says, it's like there is this magical balm, like eye drops, that when you put this magical eye drops, this is based on Indian mythology, it has the power to let you see where treasures are hidden. Now, while you can see treasures, but the drop that you put in your eye that allows you to have special radar eyes to see treasures, yes, you can see treasures, but it cannot see the eye drop. So yes, mind can see other minds, but it cannot see itself. In case you are confused, don't worry about any of it, because the main point is on 25. It says, it is not indeed our purpose to disprove experiences of sight, or sound, or knowing, or the ability to know, the mind's ability to know. It says, you know, it's not my purpose to disprove that experiences of sight, sound, knowing, smell, taste, touch, all of that it occurs. Our aim is here to undermine the cause of sorrow, the cause of suffering, which is the thought that such phenomena have true existence. The idea, the wrong view that mind is real. No, mind is also a dependently arising temporary experience, phenomena, which is the Madhyamaka position. Next two lines of 26. Illusions are not other than the mind, you say. Shantideva says to the Chittamatra position. You say, illusions are nothing other than the mind. So in that way, yeah, it's good. Because a more problematic understanding is what is seen out there, what is experienced, they are real. So it's good that now you're able to see that no, all these sense experiences, they are unreal. Unreal doesn't mean you're not experiencing them. Yes, you're experiencing them, but they have no basis. They have no essence to them. Good. So it says, this emphasis to see that everything that you perceive is basically perceived by the mind and a projection of the mind. But don't stop here. Next line of 26, he says, and yet you don't consider them the same. And yet you don't consider that even the perceiving mind must also be unreal. So the Madhyamaka position is both ends of the subject-object experience are necessarily not real. Not real meaning they are dependent on each other, interdependence. Both subject and object are empty of essence, but they are interdependent, and so all sorts of experiences, the whole gamut of confused existence temporarily, illusorily exist. Good? Don't worry about, those 4 or 5 verses where he's getting into this rather kind of convoluted, or confusing, like if you say this, I say this, if I say this, you say this, don't get too caught up. The main point is in 25, 26. Tracy. Unmute and then.
I'm sorry, I must have accidentally hit it.
Oh,
I don't
you have a question?
No.
Oh, okay. Hi.
Hi.
So again, we are not, training to be like Kempos or Geshes or, Buddhist professors, so we don't necessarily need to get into all the details of this debate. But we do need to appreciate, that even as now we are becoming less and less trusting of the habit of relating to things that appear to us to somehow be things that are independently existing, running around out there. What we like, what we don't like, as if, the things themselves are by nature likable or unlikable, and not your, your history, your karma, your confusion, your prejudice, your biases, make them likable, unlikable. So now we're making good progress in not responding to things like that and understanding, it's my mind. But then now the point here, beyond Chittamatra, Vaibhashika, Sautrantika, all of that, right? Madhyamaka is, yes, you're taking responsibility for your experiences, but don't create a new problem by overtly or subtly starting to think mind is real, mind is solid. Because if you do that, then I turns up again. That's the cause of suffering. So Shantideva says in 25, it's not that I have a quarrel with how you experience things, how experiences arise, all of that. No, I don't have a problem with that. What I'm concerned about is that you accidentally sneak in again a basis for this false I to become boss in your life. To boss you around. Okay, so we are done for today. Again, reminder, this coming Tuesday, I'm traveling, going to Malaysia to see my parents. So we won't have class. Saturday, stay tuned. I'm not sure yet. COVID times, there's all sorts of, I have to be in quarantine, how long I need to quarantine, all of that. Unclear until I get there. Then I will know what our Saturday schedule. So stay tuned whether Saturday will or will not have class. But definitely, well, nothing is definite, okay? Given that caveat, definitely next Tuesday, I intend for us to meet. Especially in Shantideva class, you know, the word definitely probably should be used sparingly. Chanchu sem choren poche ma ge ba nam ge gyur che ge ba nyam ba me ba one gong du be wa shu. Ta.
Safe trip. Safe trip, Dr. Lai.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you. Yes.
Gracias.
Enjoy your visit with your
Gracias.
Thank you. Gracias.
Thank you, Dr. Lai.
Bye bye. Good
Gracias.
night. Good
Bye.
morning.
Gracias.
Have a good weekend.
Ciao for now. Gracias.
Nice trip.